Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us on this panel today. This panel is The Future of Work, Friend or Foe, How Ubiquitous Working is Changing Family Dynamics. I'm pleased to welcome today our fantastic panel. We have joining us today Catherine Rose, CEO and founder of WiseHer, Karen Gall, Executive Chair of ETI Sorbonne, Kamas Windsor, CEO of Wrangle, and Kristina Tikhonova, CEO at Microsoft Russia. Hello, good morning, good afternoon.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Nishan.
Hello, thank you. Today we really wanted to talk about, as I said, about the title, the future of work, friend and foe. Really examining some of the different angles around how future looks and how the working future and how the new working future is actually affecting people, society, the workplace, and also community. And of course, all of you have some very, very interesting experience and backgrounds and expertise on this. So it'll be really interesting to explore this, explore this space and cross-examine cross-examine all of you. So what I wanted to do is really just start off with I guess the first question, which is talking about remote working. And as we all know, with COVID now, remote working has become something that all of us, or the majority of us, have used. Before, it was very much a niche tool for the IT professional. So now that everyone is using remote working, what are some of the benefits that you see as being like the option of remote working across this space? And if I with Catherine Rose.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Women Tech International. It's so great to be here with everyone on this great panelists. And for me personally, I've been working remotely for 20 years. So I was not in IT at the time. I've been in sales most of my career prior to my setup. And so for me, it wasn't a big change, but obviously there's some great benefits to working remotely. Of course, flexibility of schedules. One of the big things in my area, I live in the Boston, Massachusetts area in the United States, and the average commute time is about 30 minutes, and it can be up to 2 hours depending on how challenging the traffic is that day. So of course, there's less stress on commuting, all around the different metro areas and things. And of course, that gives some financial benefits for both the employees, of course, and the companies, because they're paying less leases and things like that. And of course, the positive impact on the environment. So these are all really great things and very positive moves for remote working.
Thank you, Catherine. And you mentioned actually the change in commuting dynamic, how people aren't having to commute to the office and that kind of thing. And that actually leads to an interesting question that I have for Catherine on the topic, because Catherine, I know at ETI Sorbonne, you're actually looking at the 15-minute city model, where of course all public services are designed to be 15 minutes away from a person at any one time. But if people are remote working and potentially not necessarily in the city or in somewhat remote or abstract locations, how does that actually change thinking behind that model? Does the model need to be changed, or what's going on there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Nishan. And I'm Catherine Rose. I've been a teleworker for many, many years in different countries. I am now back in Paris, where I work in the La Sorbonne group. And the idea of the neighbor city is actually an old idea. Portland in the US, any other very big cities around the world, Melbourne, but Milano as well, and many others, are really revisiting their urban planning, because we've gone mad. I think the life we've just had over the past 20 years, or even less than that for some of us, has been around not being able to be working and living at the place you want to. And so it's, as difficult as the past 10 months or 12 months have been for all of us across the globe, the lockdown and the difficulty to move around, it's been putting at the core of life and work relationship, where do you want to be? Where do you want to do your work? And please, you can work from anywhere. Your desk is where you take your computer. And so I think the good thing about that, and that's why many students and practitioners of urban planning and city officials are really thinking about, how can we rethink the city based on different centers, not having that one main centers where you have the buildings with the office corporation and then the suburbs where people live. And if you could rethink your day, then you would be able to move in a meaningful way to that very important meeting you cannot do remotely as well as you could physically. And so it's an opportunity for all of us to revisit how we spend our time and what we do when we do travel.
Thank you, Catherine. That's actually a very interesting point, especially as you mentioned, that really there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of rethinking how we do things and preparing for, I guess, the post-COVID or the post-pandemic landscape, because of course, there is going to be a future, and we need to prepare for that. And that's actually going to be an area that now I'm going to ask the panel about shortly later. If I just move. Or if I give the microphone, let's say, to Christina. Of course, I guess from your angle, being the general manager for Microsoft Russia, as Microsoft being one of the great providers for an extensively used platform in the networking space, of course, Teams, and of course the plethora of other products that you guys have. But I imagine how has COVID actually changed, I guess, the rollout deployment of both your products, but also how you're engaging with your customers and with your business and whatnot.
Yeah, thanks, Nishan. Hello, everyone. Again, so happy to be here. Actually, for Microsoft, it has been interesting experience. But definitely as a tech company, we have been working in a hybrid mode quite for a while, actually. And originally we thought, okay, for us it might be not so disruption, but actually it was, because when you are fully on remote and everything that happens with your teams, right, all hands, everything is remote. Actually, all your marketing activities are remote. It's very different, and I think we've done our lessons learned as well, and our journey, on how to be efficient on remote. But also we've seen unprecedented, speed of change at our customers, because even some of our very conservative customers say, just a couple of months before pandemic, who would say, no, never ever, we could not be that efficient, working remote. All of them, of course, during few days, few weeks, shifted to remote. And of course, Microsoft has been at the center, because we provide our customers with M365 platform, with Teams, right, as you rightly pointed out. And I think some of the benefits we've seen, first of all, was actually of productivity, which was not that obvious before, because there was many skeptics who would say, no, you cannot secure the same level of engagement at home. We've seen now that that's not true, right? Actually, 82% of the companies were reported that they've seen increased productivity, and of course that went because of their first space became also the office, right? So as our CEO said actually last week, sometimes I'm not sure, am I working from the office or am I sleeping away from home or sleeping from the office? and I think it really feels like that so far. And also the benefits on individual level, for example, many employees were saying that they feel more empowered, more autonomous. Actually, the decision-making came more towards, the employees, so they would not ask manager anymore to take decisions. And on a wide corporate level, many CEOs were saying that their business became more resilient, so they felt they're more towards the future versus how they felt in the beginning. So I think there's very different type of benefits were actually coming through.
Christine, and that's actually a very good point, as you're commenting on the change of dynamics and how actually a lot of this has brute forced the adoption of remote working, but also changing how people, the dynamics in the workplace, both team dynamics, but also individual dynamics and looking at professional and personal lives, and that crossover. Hamas, that's something that I actually want to ask you about, of course, is how what do you think these dynamics have been changing, and can you see being well, obviously Christina mentioned that some of the positive there about productivity, but are there also some little disadvantages to this type of working in terms of the team dynamic, and how do you think we should, I guess, prepare ourselves for that, or really be aware of that?
Thank you, Nishan. I think what's really interesting here is that we've removed the artificial or physical barriers to work. So you don't leave to go to a place that you work, and you don't leave work to go home. So that represents a great opportunity and also a challenge for some people. They need to set boundaries. And I think that we need to help, particularly our primary caregivers who work for us, help set those boundaries for them and help them create that space where they can still be contributing members at work and feel that they can handle both. There's an extra burden on a lot of our primary caregivers who tend to be women, particularly right now during COVID, when a lot of our schooling and other supports have been removed. So I think right now what we need to do is also look at asynchronous communication so that people don't feel that they need to be always available, that allows them to have that space in their lives and then allows them to bring their full selves to work. So it sort of does add pressure to increase documentation that's live and evergreen. You can do that through a lot of like sort of Wikipedia internal tools that people can contribute to, as well as allowing people to sort of take off their video. I find that there's a lot of pressure for us to be always available, always on call, always in these group videos. And once we get that balance right, I think this offers a maximum flexibility for all of our people. It really can allow lots of different groups and lots of different geographically distributed groups. People can live where they need to live. It can be a great boon for dual career couples who no longer have to choose where they live based on one person's career. It can also be a great boon for lifestyle. So you can access this talent anywhere in the world. But in return, we do need to sort of help them create their boundaries on their working time so that you're on when you need those synchronous activities and you can be off when you can sort of accomplish the same group work asynchronously. How do you say that?
Thank you, Thomas. And again, this is going to be something I keep saying throughout this panel, is that a really good point. But of course, you are making some really fantastic points, and that actually leads to, I guess, the point that I mentioned earlier about coming back to it, looking at beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course, for a long time we've been preparing on implementing the fourth industrial revolution and the deployments of AI or automation within the workplace, and we've been seeing how it's actually been changing the labor and skills market more generally. But now, of course, COVID has been a bit of a catalyst to that, and is really, I guess, accelerated both how we're deploying these things, but also where the workforce is located. So this is kind of like picking all of these points that we've just been talking about in terms of the makeup of the city and the location of work and how people are interacting and working. So my question, to I guess all of you, and you please, we can all decide who wants to answer this first. But the question really is, what are the challenges, or what should we take into consideration now that we have, or at least potentially have, this concept of a borderless workforce or a global workforce? Perhaps we no longer necessarily have a satellite offices where you have a city team and then another city team. There might be people that are based in one country but working the office in another. So how do we, what would be the challenges that we need to take into consideration, or what are the challenges that perhaps even haven't been considered that we're now facing? I'll leave that to the floor. Whoever wants to take that first.
Well, I can take it first in the sense that, obviously I think remote working is a great thing overall, but, particularly for diversity and inclusion globally, because as you mentioned, you can be anywhere, and it takes some of the pressure off of some folks to be having to move near or very expensive areas, to get jobs. Of course, the folks who are disabled, who can't leave their house. So you open up a huge market for them. But I do think the challenges of remote teams is, I don't believe that video communication can completely replace in person. And when you have a global workforce and perhaps you're not used to working with them, it really is onus is on the employer to understand the culture and nuances and all the things that take place in that country and in that region. My company, we're expanding globally into the MENA in Latin America, and clearly there are a lot of cultural and geographical, political challenges in those areas. So it really is on me to understand those, be able to have our teams communicate properly and respectfully, right, across all those different lines. So, again, it's a great thing, but obviously something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, if I can continue a little bit on that, as Catherine said, right, there are still some of the things people are missing in the remote environment, and this is about the decks and how they're changing, because a lot of things you can really do very efficiently, like you can meet, you can discuss, you can have a teamwork. Then over time, you see the challenge that how do you maintain actual corporate culture? Because if you look into the company and the office, it's more than just a set of the meetings, right? It's the beliefs, it's the values which will share with each other also, like formally and maybe not only verbal. And this has been, I think, a struggle also for some of the employees. How do you maintain actually this great culture, also taking into account the new people are coming on board, how you onboard them, how you keep the team cohesiveness, and this mental health and emotional connect between the people, and to actually cope with the potential fragmentation between the teams. So actually, Microsoft was also trying to crack the code here, because the teams has been playing a great role in the collaboration, but this culture piece was kind of not addressed. So, and I'm just happy to hear in this group that last Microsoft did a very big public announcement about announcing the new products, which is called Microsoft Viva, which is created exactly to address this culture soft piece. And creating the space where people might connect to different groups, organize their learning, their onboarding, have some discussions, maybe not only work related, because that's what happens in the office, right? When you go for a chat. And I think this is maybe a growing task also for us. How do we cope, with this soft culture in this new hybrid environment? Because as of the Microsoft, also responding to your second question, of the Microsoft, we will keep offices. So we think the offices will remain part of the way how actually the work is organized, but it will become more flexible. So we will stop working from 9 to 6. It will be more flexible where you work from which days of the week. But still, offices will exist, and this means that you have this hybrid mode where some of the people will be in the office, some of the people will be remote, and then it's actually maybe even more challenging how to make everybody included. Because in the remote, all of a sudden, all of us felt equally distanced, right? Equally challenged. So we are all in the same virtual room, everybody can raise a hand, and it's even easier to speak up. But in the hybrid, actually, it's not so trivial. So something to cover.
If I can add to that, what we are studying in our exploratory work around new cities, and that's why this idea of being in a neighborhood where you can do many things and your neighbors is very important, because we spent months, and depending on where you were on the planet, the lockdown was, a couple of days, a couple of weeks. It's been months for some markets. And we've been reacting very differently to that, because from being disconnected, you're isolated, and you are removed from your culture, as Christina was discussing. That also means that you are cutting yourself off of your emotional support that you really mostly get from around people. And in France, for example, we are now in that concept of the CCR sort of thing, where at 6 p.m. you have to be home, which means there is no chance to have a drink. There is no chance to share a meal. Today is my son's birthday, and we will be together with no chance for even him to celebrate his birthday. And I think there is not yet a virtual cup of coffee thing you can do, or the virtual tossing of some sparkling wine to celebrate an event. So we can do that. We're very creative, and we can always, work around something like that. If you go to the learning environment area, for example, I don't know if my core speakers, ladies, children as well, but we've moved from distant learning for our children as well. And that has been tough. Very tough. To not be prepared at all, because it looks like we are experienced working from home, working from anywhere, sort of a panelist. But our children, they had to adjust from being every day at school to every day no more school. And even the teachers had very little time to to invent a new pedagogy whereby it makes total sense for me to be able to work from home, preventing you have an internet connection, you have enough devices for everyone to work. Because I was scared when we decided to record this today, because we are here with my two sons connected to their class platform, and I was like, wow, at 3 p.m., you guys have to not use the bandwidth because otherwise it's going to crash. So just food for thought.
Yeah, same here. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Catherine. Camas, do you have any thoughts, or shall I move on to the next point?
Well, I think it's really interesting. I think to Christina's point, you need to manufacture those water cooler moments. You need to create them digitally. And also Catherine Gall saying, we celebrate virtually, and there are different tools being created. For people who are who need mentorship, for the only woman, the only BIPOC, mentorship is very, very important. And often that can be facilitated through informal contact in an office. And we're losing that through these structured video calls that we're doing. So it is important for organizations to consider that and to open up different means and different methods of informal contact. And there are different sort of software that accomplishes that. I think it's really important that we sort of have an active role in creating those cultural moments, because it is more challenging virtually for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely, thank you. And well, I think for me, one of the key points from what all of you said is really looking at the the change dynamic in personal relationships and physicality of how we communicate and not just socialize but interact professionally. And whilst I guess Christina made a good point about the universality of these challenges, in that affected everyone across the workplace, so to speak, in terms of how we need to all work, well, for the most part, all work remotely and on these calls and change the way we do things. But one of the questions I wanted to ask linked to that is, we mentioned universality or these universal challenges that we all face. But then, of course, as I think some of you were hinting at there, that actually there is a disproportionality when it comes to who has been affected by how we work, and when it comes to the working relationships and the interpersonal communication. If we no longer be in the physical space, or have those water cooler moments, or the informal conversations, or the mentorship conversations that perhaps aren't as structured as the 1 hour teleconference or whatever it is. So thinking from the the representative or the gender equality perspective, has this disconnect from the physical interpersonal interactions, has that stifled the gender equity challenges or agenda that I'm working so hard for? What would be all of your take on that? Like, where do we stand at the minute, and what does the future look like?
Well, I think you need to look at the statistics. I mean, we're in this crisis of epic proportions. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I mean, remote work is great, to be more inclusive, but in the US alone, 4 times as many women dropped out of the workforce as men. In fact, we've lost about 5.4 million jobs, and women of color in the US have borne the most brunt of it. So, it's a very, very challenging thing that women are facing. And not to mention, when you add the other personal challenges with, as Karen mentioned, the remote school. But then if you think about domestic violence and things like that, where going into the office sometimes was, shelter from a storm. So this is a really big challenge for companies. I think that there are a lot of companies that are on this call right now who offer, reskilling and upskilling, and really worked hard to build in equity. But, Camus mentioned this idea of being able to connect one-on-one and being intentional about diversity sometimes can get lost in the day-to-day of just needing to get things done. So I think it's something that we absolutely need to keep in mind.
I'd like to add that particularly right now, we need as leaders and as employers to understand the demands that are on our people we need to give them the flexibility so they can show up and perform and also accomplish what they need to at home. And we need to include men in this. We need to give them the flexibility so that they feel that they can spend time at home, which gives their partners the time to dedicate to work as well. This is definitely going to be a whole family solution, and so we need to involve all of our caregivers, all of our partners, and to give them the ability to manage their work and their home lives so they stay in the workforce. This is really critical. We lose these women, 1 out of 4 women, to build on Catherine Rose's statistics, 1 out of 4 women are currently considering leaving the workforce or downgrading their careers. We lose these women, we lose that rung on the ladder. It's going to have a big impact on our pipeline in our future, and we're going to have fewer leaders, female leaders in the future. So this is a crisis, I do agree, and we need to help.
Usually those types of crises, they sort of magnify the vulnerability of the weakest, whether it's women to men, whether it's also your health issue. This crisis hasn't the debate about how healthy are you and how healthy are your life practices, the washing hands, no contact and stuff like that. Today, in our research activity, we study the fact that, it used to be, at least for the European countries, that you would not speak about your health situation. And now it's like, if you want to go back to the corporate site because you have a need or you have a meeting or whatever, you have to be tested, you have to show that, there's no fever, there's no other symptoms and so on. And so it is opening that very sensitive topic of how healthy are you? And, I don't want my employer to know if I have this co-mortality factor or if I'm suffering for something. But that sort of lack of trust that is starting to come up is a tough to go through and to share with your coworkers, your family, and so on.
Yeah, I think something we've done in Microsoft actually also some additional programs how to support women and not only women, right, but different groups of employees who has been challenged, including the schooling leave, which, if I remember right, is like months. So, and it means any woman, for example, who has a kid who needs to study at home, she can take paid leave for 2 months. That has been a great thing, but we did not see a lot of people has taken that, but it provided, I think, great feeling of confidence in your company, right? That you can take this if needed. So, because many colleagues and many my friends from other companies were asking, wow, but you should be killing productivity if half of your team immediately went on leave. No, it didn't happen, actually. Some of the people leave because they needed, right? And we asked the line managers, the people managers, that they should not even approve, right? So there was no point to approve it. It's just every woman who needs it, she can take it. So I think the kind of practices need to collectively encourage them, not just in our companies, also across. Whenever I talk to the customers, we also discuss how to make it better, right? And then to the Catherine point, what we also try to be very data-driven, which means looking at the diversity data of your team on a regular basis in multiple parts of the data, geography, business unit, is essential. Of course, only data you can actually track what is happening. We can have this nice belief, which I truly believe that technology is making us more equal, right? But it's important to see what is happening in the real life, in the real time.
Thank you, Christine. And yes, some very good points. And I really like the point about when we're looking at tackling the gender equity issue. Speak that is not, we can't have the solutions aren't necessarily sourced from one gender. So it's not a matter of, well, women are disproportionately represented, therefore the solutions to come from women. This is a holistic problem. This problem affects everyone in the workplace and within our cultural dynamics, and in turn we also need men be part of this combination and these solutions, as well as women, as well as and non-binary people as well. So this really needs to be a holistic, all-inclusive solution to move forward. I'm going to pick on that point that you mentioned, Chris, on being driven. because of course we know that society now is really, technology has, I think, become more integrated in society, and how we both deploy technology, but also how utilizing technology, specifically AI automation. And an example of an AI deployment that from last year, picking up on the point of education, was that the UK government deployed an algorithm to predetermine examination results for kids, because they couldn't do their exams. And of course, the predictions were pretty awful. It caused a lot of problems. And it's kind of, I guess, as a bad case scenario of how, what not to do when you're deploying an algorithm or an AI. But I mentioned that point, of course, because I know that Microsoft are pretty engaged in the AI for good space. So I thought it would be a good opportunity for you to perhaps share with both the panel and our audience a bit more about some of the good things that Microsoft is doing when it comes to AI and data-driven automation.
Yeah, happily, because I think during the pandemic, this is an area of technologies which has been showing a huge variety of the scenarios, right? Because it is so broad. It is actually multi-industrial, and we've seen many new cases of AI, starting with the detection of masks on people's faces, right? Building the models of the forecasts of action, early diagnosis of the pneumonia, you name it, right? Almost like in every response on pandemic, we've seen AI. And Microsoft actually and Bill Gates started investing into AI more than 20 years ago. So we've built some of the knowledge base and patents, and we started also to give back. So a few years ago, Microsoft has announced its AI for Good program, meaning how we can actually use artificial intelligence to help tackle some of the biggest world issues. And there are 5 programs currently running. It's AI for Health. And particularly in AI for Health, we try to get as much data as possible, anonymized and being available to the researchers, so that scientific researchers can tackle some big issues of human beings, such as cancer and other diseases. Then it's AI for cultural heritage, like trying to preserve the language that are disappearing, or cultural heritage objects. Like we've created, for example, a digital recreation of old historical landscape of the Mont Saint-Michel and other places like that. And then it's AI for like tackling some of the health problems, using the climate change, which is known to be one of the key issues to solve, for human beings. And 2 other programs has been also started recently, and that's for AI for accessibility. For example, how AI can help to people who has disability, and that's actually quite a simple things which can improve drastically the people with life of people with disabilities. Like one of the apps we created is Seeing AI. So people who cannot see, they can just use their phone and phone camera to literally point the camera into something, and they will hear the description of what it is in front of them. So there are many things which sound simple, right? But they really help people's life. But the example you've given, Nishan, is very resonate, because with all these fast developing AI, which will probably even speed up, right? Because digitalization is going to speed up. It's really become an important point to keep track of the ethical principles of those AI applications. And you mentioned the scores in the course as one of the examples. And that's we are also investing into developing the common principles, the ethical principles of AI, which are discussed with the governments, and there are some governments which are joining the forces together. And we've come up with a few important principles, starting with their accountability, meaning the developers who create the app actually should take accountability for the software, right, and its impact. Transparency, so it means people should understand the algorithms, how, for example, this algorithm is putting the score. Because you know the algorithm, you can actually challenge or you can notice the imparity. And a few others like fairness, which also means diversity to be incorporated there. So, for example, if you train your algorithms on a white man, it will simply ignore the other groups of the population. So it means starting with the group developers, like your team, your project team is working on the product. You should make sure that actually this group of developers is representative of the society for which the product is developed. So it's really cool, seeing how this is going to be developed.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I'm actually a fan of the ethical principles that Microsoft been putting together. I was at a UN conference for AI Good not too long ago, and it was marketing material, but it was the golden rule. It was a ruler from Microsoft which had the ethical principles on it, so accountability and transparency. So it was something that has always stuck with me, and quite rightly so when we're talking about I guess the being representative. So I of course come from a cybersecurity background, so I always talk about security by design. But really, what we're talking about here is ethics by design or diversity by design. So actually, you're having the founding principles are baked in from the get-go. This isn't a matter of designing an algorithm and then thinking, oh, how do we make it diverse? how do we adjust the data to fit right? And of course, I'm not going to get started on facial recognition and whatnot, because as you can imagine, talking about white male faces being trained in the data sets, you can only imagine what my face does to any kind of facial recognition algorithm. But there was a point there about accessibility and mobility, and I thought I wanted to just poke Catherine Gore's brain on that slightly, because again going back to the model of the 15-minute city and looking at how we're approaching mobility and accessibility, and that kind of links to quality of life and social interaction in a way. So how do you see that adapting, or are the things that we've been predicting happening but they're just accelerating? Like, what would be your take on that side?
Well, there is a digital platform that we are developing based on the research we've been conducting with other universities across the globe, really, because this idea that you are happy if you can do a lot of things in your neighborhood, which doesn't mean that you should be prevented to crossing the city, to wanting to buy a special piece of bread loaf or whatever from an hour away from where you live or where you work. So the whole idea of actually mapping out what you have within 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on the density of where you live, is now a reality. And through different sorts of technology and converging data sets into a common tool, which is something we are developing, is allowing all of us to know how many doctors do you have, and where can I take my girl to a gym class, and there are basic 6 essential functions. If you look at Maslow hierarchy of needs, there are 6 domains that you really need to have to build a model around quality of life. It's, to buy grocery food, to be able to go to work or do some sort of working. It's the culture and the entertainment. It's your health network. It's the nature and having access to an outdoor sort of space. And it's family and friends. Where are they? So if I can actually pull up data, it will help me find out and feel more connected to my neighborhood. And again, get to know who's around. And that's way I can develop an inclusive and a very strong network based of the people I know. And instead of dropping my children to a babysitter or a nanny or a kindergarten that's far away, I can just do that close by and feel good about it. So all the data we can have, which is obviously open source data that we can pull up, or from a voluntary sort of people sharing their data, so you can increase actually your knowledge of special features and offerings, and also preference. So we did a test in Paris. We asked people from the neighborhood, which is the 20th neighborhood, and we asked them to take a couple of streets, walk by, look at the buildings, which they had never done because they would never walk around their neighborhood, and sort of say, hey, how about this bank opening on weekends and becoming a place where we can do reading, have access to some books or some digital entertainment programs or whatever. The mayor city of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, just decided to open schools lately. So they can be shelter spaces for families who don't have a garden, don't have access to green areas, and so they can have a shared environment where they can do things. So all of that can be sort of secured by technology, but certainly it's about understanding what are the things that you can do using this on a very different way. It's called Chrono Urbanism. So it's the fact that you add many different use to a single, and instead of opening a school 8 or 6 hours a day, you can use them, offering them to the inhabitants of the area for more shared activities.
Wow.
Thank you, Catherine. Before I move on to I guess the last thematic area, I was just wondering if Camas or Catherine, if you wanted to chime in, I guess, on any of those points surrounding either on the data-driven side and AI, or looking at the, I guess, community engagement and the effects of digitalization and cultural interaction.
Well, I mean, I'm encouraged to hear that Microsoft is adopting these ethics principles on the Advancing Women in Technology Global Council. And I know AI has come up a lot, especially because, it was proven that a lot of these bots that review resumes and things like that have been proven to be biased against women and people of color. So it's just really encouraging. And then my mom is a paraplegic, so listening to Catherine talking about, using this information so that folk can actually live, work, and, be part of their local communities is just, it's so inspiring. So that's my comment.
Great, fantastic, thank you.
It's opening, if you allow me, it's opening the discussion, and that can be of interest for us all as well, towards common good. And what this crisis has revealed is this idea of, what does it belong to me? What do I own? And the thing around on-demand use. And many times we own things that we only use a portion of the time, and many others don't have access to even a restricted access. So that common thing, and we all know that the Nobel Prize Professor Ahmed Yunus, for example, he said the vaccine against coronavirus should be common good, and we should all have access to it. Versus right now, we don't even know. I don't know how it's like in your countries and in your cities, but it's not totally clear. And so, a similar way, public space and public services and public support should be really more broadly available. And most of the time, it's because people don't even know. So that whole idea of mapping out and being able to understand where are the key things I need for my well-being and for my quality of life is opening up to sharing and having more enjoyment and happiness in the city.
Yeah.
Thank you. And no, I absolutely agree with you. I think, of course, the pandemic has really highlighted a lot of issues that we have, but I think also it's almost forced us to have I don't want to say a long, hard look at ourselves, but it's really forced us to actually evaluate a lot of the service, a lot of the infrastructure and legacy infrastructure that we've run on for so long, and just perhaps whether it's taken for granted or just assume that that's the status quo and we just live with it. But I think that COVID has really put pressure and really shown the cracks on what we need to change, and really, really evaluating how do we do things and how do we change doing things. And I'll be remiss if I don't mention Finland at this point, of course, because I'm in Finland, and you mentioned the mapping of public services, utilizing AI and that kind of thing, and the AI strategy is something that the Finnish government is working tirelessly on to actually map out digital service and how to deploy public services in a way that's citizen-centric or user-centric, so that depending on certain life events, that actually a certain person might require a prioritization of certain services, so using some data drivers and AI to do that. But as we're looking at, I guess, COVID being the case, and COVID being the driver, and really thinking on how we can utilize this moment in time as a time to, as an opportunity to create new solutions, and especially thinking about when we're back to the conversation about representation and gender equity, if we're to use this moment as this opportunity of how can we affect change, instill change, or having this as call to action. So just thinking about the audience that we have in front of us today, and of course both in person in Sharjah and wider on our online. Perhaps I'll hand the mic to Kamas to ask where speaking as this call to action, where should we start? How should members of our community engage? How can we actually drive this progress that we all really see that we need? But what are the first steps? How do we activate? How do we get going?
I mean, I think representation matters and inclusion matters. And so wherever we are, whether we're leaders or we're educators or we're community organizers, it's important to engage the group that we want to engage with and help draw them into the conversation, draw them into the careers, draw them into the workforce, and allow them to bring their full selves. I mean, it's about, especially younger generation, they are really looking at sustainability and purpose. They want to work with organizations that are sustainable, and both for themselves and for the world. They want to bring themselves to the office, so they are no longer something of extreme compartmentalization. And they want a voice, and it's up to us to help guide and to pull them in and to activate their skills and talents. So I really think right now we have a inflection crisis point that gives us a risk and opportunity. And the risk is that we will lose these women and lose these vulnerable populations. But the opportunity is to put them through this and to create a more inclusive and equal environment where we can all sort of have a seat at the table, and that's what we all want. And so we just need to sort of look. This gives us an opportunity to step back, be critical, and look, what is working, what isn't working? Perhaps a sort of more working from home, flexible arrangement, and then when we go back into the office, how do we model as senior leaders in our organization? How do we model, you don't always have to be on. We can collaborate. You can do your asynchronous work at home when you need to. You can focus on something during the day, whether it's sending someone to a dentist appointment or doing some personal development work, and also get your work done after regular working hours. How do we create that space? How do we have a global workforce? How do we bring in different cultures while maintaining a certain standard that we don't deviate from? Yes. I work with people from Japan, and I work with some people from Netherlands. They obviously, both these cultures have a very different approach to direct communication. However, we have the same standard of inclusion. We don't accept, aggression against other groups, whether they're in the room or not. So these are things that I think we are step forward into this new world, and it's, like I said, it's high reward. This is a really interesting time, and those that stay and hold the torch up, I think we're going to see great things on the other side of this.
Yeah, and just building on what Kamas said, I think part of it is I brought a point earlier, but about there are people doing these jobs, and people need assistance, support beyond the work. So I think, part of it is just giving them a little grace, during this time and beyond. And it did shine a light on a lot of the specific challenges that perhaps, women face and caregivers face. And if companies can provide upskilling or reskilling or, re-entry programs for women, because there's going to be a lot of them that are looking for opportunities, put programs into play, double down on that. The other thing is, there are a lot of programs out there, but I think sometimes we need to reach down into our communities and really make sure that people understand that there are opportunities available for them. Using AI to hinder, or not to hinder the progress, but to help the progress. And I also think this idea of profit at all costs, right? Human, psychological, physical, environmental. I think that mentality is thankfully starting to move more toward the social impact area. But I think we really need a good job and keep that going there. And of course, profits are very important, but so are the social consequence. So I think it's just all these need to be kept in mind.
Yeah, if I may just add a couple of words on top of what was said, because I really agree with the point of Kamas, Catherine. I think it boils down to the corporate culture, right? And what type of culture you are creating. Is it really inclusive in terms of whether different groups will feel comfortable, joining? And this is also becoming, I think, for a younger generation, this is becoming really a almost competitive advantage, right? Almost a differentiator, because they want to work in atmosphere, but then like eating a culture and leave the culture and all these small things as Cam was saying, right? If you are then sending the o'clock in the morning and asking, I'm waiting for reports at 10 o'clock, then you are not actually giving the right signal. So I think this is where the culture, the pronounced piece, and the essence should follow. And then, of course, coming back, data-driven approach, looking into the real data. Okay, how you're moving, how you're progressing in those diverse groups.
Well, on my side, I guess I'm very inspired by the Mahatma Gandhi word, be the change you want to see in the world. But there's another one. It's from an anthropologist, and she says, it's Margaret Mead, and she says, never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So I guess, again, and, as dramatic as on many fronts this pandemic has been, because we've lost friends and relatives, and there are so many casualties, and even people working in hospitals, the doctors, they've just have had the last period of their life this couple of months. But on the other hand, for all of us, if we don't learn this to totally rethink the way we live our life and raise our children and have the relationship we have with the friends we have, then we really, it's not it, because it's now ever that we can row a boat and challenge what we have been suffering from, because we are ultimately the designers of all that, and we cannot just be the victims of two viruses.
Thank you, Catherine. No, I'm a big fan of the Mahatma Gandhi quote, because being the change that you want to see is something that I try and embody, which is very much why I'm engaged in Women in Tech Global. But of course, I think really, take a bit of a meta view. I think we're all essentially architects of this new future, where really we're trying to, or what we need to do is bring the humanity into the digitalization. Obviously, as we are physically apart, we need to make sure that this human interconnectivity isn't lost within that, and a lot of the thinking around transparency and accountability, but also interoperability, interaction, and just the relationship and the cultural perspective as well. How, again, we mentioned earlier about how in different regions people interact differently. So we can't just assume that one model fits all, and that we really kind of blend all of it into our thinking. So I think it's very powerful, and I think it's quite rightly so that we have the risks if we don't do it correctly, but we have a very, very good opportunity here. So I really hope that we can actually, well, I say we can, we will. So on that note, I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you all, Christina, Catherine Rose, Catherine Gull, and Kamas for your time today and your input and your thoughts, and really fascinating. And I'm glad that I share these views with all. So on that note, thank you all for your time, and have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.